The morning of my wedding should have been perfect. I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting my veil for the 10th time, my hands trembling slightly. Not from nerves about marrying Jake, he was the best thing that had ever happened to me. No, my hands shook because I kept glancing at those two empty chairs in the front row, adorned with white ribbons and reserved signs that read Mother of the Bride and Father of the Bride. My name is Hannah, and at 32, I'd waited my whole life for my parents to see me. Really see me. Not through the lens of comparison to my younger sister Victoria, but as their daughter who deserved love just for existing. As I stared at my reflection, I saw a beautiful bride, something I never thought I'd be able to say about myself. Years of being told I needed to lose weight, fix my hair, dress better, be more like Victoria had carved deep grooves in my self-esteem. The wedding coordinator knocked softly. "Hannah, it's time." I took one last look at my phone. No messages, no calls. They really weren't coming. My maid of honor, my best friend Sarah, squeezed my shoulder. "You've got this. You've got us. You've got Jake. That's all you need." But even as I nodded and smiled, a part of me, that little girl who just wanted her parents' approval, was breaking. They'd RSVP'd, yes. Mom had even asked about the menu options, commenting that the salmon sounded lovely. Dad had mentioned looking forward to the father-daughter dance. Lies. All lies. As I walked down that aisle, past cousins and aunts and uncles who'd made the journey, past friends who'd flown in from across the country, I kept my eyes on Jake. His face lit up when he saw me, tears streaming down his cheeks. In that moment, I tried to let his love fill the hollow space my parents had left, but some wounds run too deep to heal with just a loving glance. Part 2. To understand why those chairs remained empty, you need to know about Victoria. My sister, 2 years younger, was everything my parents had dreamed of in a daughter. Where I struggled in school, she excelled effortlessly. Where I was quiet and bookish, she was vivacious and popular. Where I carried extra weight that no amount of dieting seemed to shake, she had the metabolism of a hummingbird and the figure of a model. The comparisons started early. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" became the soundtrack of my childhood. Report card days were exercises in humiliation. Victoria got straight A's again. "Hannah, what's this C in math? You need to apply yourself more." Family dinners were battlegrounds of portion control. "That's enough for you, Hannah." "Victoria, sweetheart, have some more, you're so thin." Shopping trips ended in tears. "That dress would look stunning on Victoria." "Hannah, let's find something more flattering for your body type." By high school, I'd learned to make myself small, not physically, because apparently that was impossible according to my mother's constant reminders, but emotionally. I stopped sharing my victories because they were always diminished. Made the honor roll, Victoria made valedictorian. Got into a good college, Victoria got a full scholarship. The day I got engaged should have been one of the happiest of my life. Jake proposed at sunset on the beach where we'd had our first date. It was romantic, perfect, everything I'd dreamed of. I called my parents immediately, bursting with joy. "Oh," my mother said, her voice flat, "that's sudden. We've been together for 3 years, Mom." "I suppose, it's just. Victoria isn't even engaged yet. Don't you think you should wait?" "Wait for what? For Victoria to get married first?" "I'm just saying she's been with Marcus for 5 years. It seems unfair to steal her thunder." "Steal her thunder. By getting engaged. To the man I loved." The message was clear. Even my happiness was an affront to Victoria's superiority. Part 3. Planning a wedding when your parents treat it like a betrayal is its own special kind of torture. Every decision I made was met with criticism or indifference. The venue I chose wasn't as nice as the one Victoria had mentioned liking, and she wasn't even engaged yet. My dress wasn't as elegant as the one Victoria had tried on just for fun last summer. My color scheme was too bold. Victoria preferred pastels. Jake watched me slowly crumble under the weight of their disapproval. "Why do you keep telling them anything?" he asked one night after I'd gotten off a particularly brutal phone call where my mother suggested I postpone the wedding until after Victoria's theoretical future wedding. "They're my parents," I said, as if that explained everything. And to me, it did. Despite everything, that little girl inside me still hoped that one day, something I did would be enough. The breaking point came 2 months before the wedding. Victoria had finally gotten engaged, an elaborate proposal at a 5-star restaurant with a photographer hidden in the wings. My parents were over the moon. Suddenly, wedding planning was the most exciting thing in the world. They threw themselves into helping Victoria, even though her wedding was planned for a full year after mine. "We're thinking of having the engagement party the same weekend as your wedding," my mother mentioned casually during a phone call. "What? Mom, no. That's my wedding weekend." "Well, we can't help it if that's when the venue is available. Besides, people are already traveling. It would be convenient for everyone." "Convenient to overshadow my wedding with Victoria's engagement party?" "Oh, Hannah, why do you always have to make everything about you? This victim complex is really unbecoming." I hung up on her. It was the first time I'd ever done that. My hands shook for an hour afterward, but Jake held me and told me I'd done the right thing. They never called back to apologize. In fact, they didn't call at all for 3 weeks. When they finally did, it was to ask what time they needed to arrive for the rehearsal dinner, as if nothing had happened. as if they hadn't tried to hijack my wedding weekend for Victoria's celebration. Part 4. The week before my wedding, I was a bundle of nerves and cautious optimism. My parents had confirmed they were coming. They'd even asked about their hotel reservations. Victoria had called to say she'd found the perfect dress to wear as a bridesmaid, even though I hadn't asked her to be one. I'd carefully selected my wedding party to include only people who had supported and loved me unconditionally, and Victoria had never been that person. "It's fine," she said breezily when I explained this. "I'll just wear something that matches your colors. We need family photos to look coordinated." Everything had to be about her, even my wedding. 2 days before the wedding, my extended family started arriving. My Aunt Linda, my mother's sister, was the first to pull me aside. "Honey, I just wanted to check your parents are coming, right? I asked your mother about carpooling from the hotel, and she got very strange about it." "They said they're coming," I replied. But doubt crept in. "Well, she said something about a conflict." I assumed she was joking. My stomach dropped. I called my mother immediately. "Oh, Hannah," she sighed when I asked directly if they were coming. "This is all so complicated." "What's complicated about attending your daughter's wedding? You know how we feel about this. You rushing to get married before Victoria. It's caused so much tension. People are talking." "People? What people?" "Everyone wonders why you couldn't wait. It looks like you're trying to compete with your sister." "I'm getting married because I love Jake and we want to start our life together." "This has nothing to do with Victoria." "Everything affects the family, Hannah. Your actions have consequences. So you're not coming? Just say it. Stop playing games and tell me you're choosing to miss your daughter's wedding." There was a long silence. Then, "We never actually received the invitation. How were we supposed to know the details?" It was such a blatant lie that I actually laughed. A harsh, bitter sound I didn't recognize as coming from my own throat. "I handed it to you personally. You put it on your refrigerator. I've seen it there. I don't know what you think you saw, but we never got a formal invitation. If you wanted us there, you should have made sure we had all the information." Part 5. The morning of my wedding, as I stood in that bridal suite without my parents, the truth was unbearable but clear. They'd chosen to hurt me rather than see me happy before Victoria. My Aunt Linda was furious when she realized what had happened. She'd seen the invitation on their fridge herself just a week ago when she'd stopped by their house. "This is unconscionable," she muttered, helping me with my veil since my mother wasn't there to do it. "I cannot believe my sister would do this." The ceremony was beautiful despite their absence. Jake's family stepped up in ways that broke and healed my heart simultaneously. His mother sat in the chair meant for mine. His father walked me down the aisle, whispering, "You've always been like a daughter to us, Hannah. Today just makes it official." But the whispers had started. Family members noticed the empty chairs. The story spread like wildfire through the reception. By the time we cut the cake, I'd been pulled aside by no fewer than 6 relatives, all expressing shock and outrage at my parents' behavior. My cousin Michael, who'd flown in from Seattle, was particularly vocal. "This is about Victoria, isn't it? They couldn't stand you getting married first." I tried to downplay it, not wanting drama at my wedding, but the damage was done. The family grapevine was buzzing. 3 days into our honeymoon in Santorini, my phone exploded with messages. Victoria's engagement party, the one my mother had threatened to schedule during my wedding weekend, had been a disaster. Half the family had refused to attend in protest of how my parents had treated me. Those who did show up made their displeasure known. According to my Aunt Linda, who sent me a detailed play-by-play despite my request to be left alone on my honeymoon, my mother had spent the entire party doing damage control, telling anyone who would listen that I'd uninvited them from my wedding out of jealousy. "But we all know the truth, honey," Linda's message read. "Your cousin Emma actually took a photo of your invitation on their fridge last month when she was visiting. Your mother's lies aren't fooling anyone." Victoria, for her part, was livid that her engagement party had been ruined by the drama. She called me in tears, screaming that I'd deliberately sabotaged her special moment. "You couldn't just let me have this one thing," she sobbed. "Victoria, I was on my honeymoon. I didn't do anything. You turned the family against us. Against me. This was supposed to be my moment." "Every moment has been your moment," I said quietly. "Our entire lives, every moment has been yours. I just wanted one day. One single day that was mine. And even that was too much for you all to give me." Part 6. When Jake and I returned from our honeymoon, I expected things to calm down. I was wrong. The family divide had deepened. My parents had gone into full damage control mode, calling relatives and spinning elaborate stories about why they'd missed my wedding. The versions varied depending on who they were talking to. I was told they claimed everything from a medical emergency to never receiving an invitation to being explicitly told not to come. My Uncle Robert, my father's brother, called me directly. "Hannah, I need to hear this from you. Did you tell your parents they weren't welcome at your wedding?" "No, Uncle Robert. I invited them. I wanted them there. They chose not to come because I was getting married before Victoria." "That's what I thought. Your father's telling people you've been jealous of Victoria your whole life and you excluded them to hurt her." The projection was so profound it took my breath away. Me? Jealous of Victoria? I mean, yes, I'd envied the love she received, the easy praise, the way our parents lit up when she walked into a room, but I'd never wanted to be her. I just wanted to be loved as me. The confrontation was inevitable. 3 weeks after our return, my parents showed up at our apartment unannounced. Jake answered the door, and I heard my father's booming voice from the living room. "We need to speak with our daughter, alone. Anything you have to say to Hannah can be said in front of me," Jake replied calmly. When I came to the door, my mother's face was pinched with anger. "What have you been telling people? The truth. Your truth," she spat. "You've turned the entire family against us, against Victoria. Her wedding is being ruined because of your petty jealousy." "My jealousy?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You missed my wedding, my actual wedding, to protect Victoria's theoretical future spotlight, and I'm the jealous one?" "You've always resented her success," my father said coldly. "We thought you'd grown out of it, but clearly, you haven't." Something in me snapped. Years of suppressed pain and anger came pouring out. "You want to talk about resentment? Let's talk about the diet you put me on when I was 8 because I didn't look like Victoria. Let's talk about the birthday parties where she got elaborate celebrations and I got told we couldn't afford it that year, only to watch you throw her another party 6 months later. Let's talk about my college graduation that you missed because Victoria had a dance recital the same day. Let's talk about every single time you introduced us as Victoria and her sister instead of by our names." My mother's face went white. "We treated you both equally." "No, you didn't. And everyone knows it now. That's why they're not coming to Victoria's wedding. Not because of anything I said or did, but because they've finally seen what you've been doing to me my entire life." Part 7. The aftermath of that confrontation was swift and brutal. My parents doubled down on their narrative, but the more they pushed, the more resistance they met. My Aunt Linda, who had initially tried to stay neutral, finally reached her breaking point when my mother accused me of manipulating the family. "I've watched you favor Victoria for 30 years, Linda told her sister in a phone call that she later relayed to me. "I've held my tongue because it wasn't my place, but missing Hannah's wedding? That was cruel. Even for you." Meanwhile, Victoria's wedding planning had become a nightmare for her. Vendors whispered about the family drama. The relatives who had pledged not to attend held firm. Even some of her own friends began questioning what kind of family would skip their daughter's wedding out of favoritism. In a desperate attempt to fix things, Victoria reached out to Jake while I was at work. She showed up at his office, he worked in marketing, and she'd gotten his office address from social media stalking. The receptionist called him down, and he found her waiting in the lobby, dressed impeccably as always, with her practiced smile firmly in place. "Jake, we need to talk about Hannah," she said, as if they were old friends. "I don't think we do," he replied. "Look, I know she's your wife, but she's also my sister, and she's always been difficult, emotional. She takes things too personally." "Like your parents missing her wedding?" Victoria's smile tightened. "They were hurt by her actions. She's always been jealous of me, and this wedding situation just brought it all to the surface. I'm sure as her husband, you've noticed her insecurities." Jake told me later that he'd never been more disgusted by someone in his life. "She stood there, looking like butter wouldn't melt in her mouth, trying to convince me that you were the problem, that I should manage you better for the sake of family harmony." She actually said manage me? Her exact words were, "Sometimes we have to manage the people we love for their own good and the good of the family." But Victoria had miscalculated. She'd assumed Jake was like the boyfriends I'd had before, the ones who'd met my family and immediately started making comments about how lucky I was to have such a pretty sister, how I should try to be more like her. She didn't understand that Jake saw me, really saw me, and loved me not despite my differences from Victoria, but because of everything I was that she wasn't. "I told her that you were the strongest person I knew," Jake said, holding me as I processed this new betrayal. "That watching you maintain grace and dignity while your family treated you like a second-class citizen made me love you even more. And that if she ever tried to undermine our marriage again, she'd regret it." Part 8. Victoria's attempt to manipulate Jake backfired spectacularly. He'd recorded the entire conversation on his phone, one-party consent state, perfectly legal, and when she began spreading lies about what was discussed, he had proof. He didn't release it publicly, but he made sure key family members knew it existed. My cousin Emma was the first to hear it. She called me immediately after, fury evident in her voice. "She actually tried to turn your husband against you? Hannah, this is abuse. This whole thing your entire life, it's been emotional abuse." The word hit me like a physical blow. Abuse. I'd never let myself think of it that way. It was just family dynamics, sibling rivalry, parental preference. But Emma was right. The systematic degradation of my self-worth, the constant comparisons, the gaslighting about events, it was abuse. More family members began reaching out with their own stories, memories of moments when they'd witnessed my parents' favoritism but hadn't known how to intervene. My elderly grandmother, who I'd thought had never noticed, called me one evening. "I've watched this for years, sweetheart," she said, her voice fragile but firm. "I tried to talk to your mother about it when you were young, but she wouldn't hear it. I should have done more. I'm sorry." "It's not your fault, Grandma. I'm not going to Victoria's wedding," she announced. "I'm too old to pretend I support this nonsense anymore. You deserved better, Hannah. You always have. My parents were apoplectic when they found out. They drove to my grandmother's house, but she refused to see them. Tell them I'm not interested in their excuses, she told her caregiver loud enough for them to hear through the door. The family boycott of Victoria's wedding grew. What had started with a handful of relatives had become a significant portion of the guest list. Victoria's perfect wedding was crumbling, and she blamed me entirely. She started a smear campaign on social media, posting cryptic messages about toxic sisters and jealousy destroying families. But it backfired when people who knew the real story began commenting with the truth. One of my cousins simply posted, "Didn't your parents skip Hannah's wedding because she was getting married first?" Victoria deleted the posts, but screenshots had already been taken and shared in the family group chat that I'd been removed from, but Jake was still in. He showed me the messages relative after relative expressing disgust at Victoria's behavior and my parents' enabling of it. Part 9. 6 months after my wedding, Victoria's big day arrived. From what I heard through the grapevine, it was a beautiful affair for the 40% of invited guests who actually showed up. The photos on social media were carefully curated to hide the empty tables and sparse dance floor. My parents had spent a fortune trying to make it perfect, as if throwing money at the problem could fill the seats that remained empty on principle. They'd hired the best photographer, the most expensive caterer, a 12-piece band. But you can't buy back a reputation destroyed by your own cruelty. I didn't go, of course. Jake and I spent that weekend at a bed and breakfast in the mountains, our phones turned off, enjoying each other's company and the peace that came from being far away from the drama. But when we returned, my voicemail was full. The first was from my mother, sobbing about how I'd ruined Victoria's wedding by turning the family against them. The second was from Victoria herself, screaming about how I'd destroyed her life. The third, surprisingly, was from my father, calm, cold, and devastating. "I hope you're happy," he said. "You've destroyed this family with your selfishness and your victim complex. Victoria's wedding was ruined because of you. We've decided it's best if we no longer have contact. You've chosen to alienate yourself from this family, and we're simply respecting your wishes." They were cutting me off, but framing it as my choice. The ultimate gaslighting move. Jake found me listening to the messages, tears streaming down my face. Not tears of sadness, exactly, but of relief? Grief? Maybe both. "They'll never admit what they did to you, will they?" he asked, holding me close. In their minds, they're the victims. They always will be. But then more messages came through. Aunt Linda, Uncle Robert, Grandma, cousins, friends of the family, all reaching out with support and love. All affirming that I wasn't crazy, that what happened to me was wrong, that I deserved better. My cousin Michael sent a particularly touching message. "Hannah, you should know that at Victoria's wedding, during the toast time, Uncle Robert stood up and said, 'Before we celebrate Victoria, I want to acknowledge someone who's not here, Hannah, who deserved to have her family at her wedding but was let down by the people who should have loved her unconditionally.'" Half the room applauded. Your parents looked like they wanted to disappear. Part 10. It's been a year now since Victoria's wedding. 2 years since mine. The family divide has solidified into something permanent. There are those who still associate with my parents and Victoria, mostly distant relatives who don't know the full story, or those who value keeping peace over standing for what's right. And then there's my chosen family, the relatives and friends who saw the truth and chose to support me. My parents have made several attempts to reconcile, but never with an apology or acknowledgement of wrongdoing. It's always framed as me needing to move past my jealousy and stop punishing Victoria. They've even sent flying monkeys, mutual acquaintances who suddenly reached out wanting to help heal the family. But Jake and I have held firm. No reconciliation without acknowledgement. No relationship without respect. Victoria's marriage to Marcus lasted 8 months. According to family gossip, he'd witnessed how she treated me and began recognizing the same manipulative patterns in their relationship. When he left, she blamed me for that too, claiming the stress of the family situation I'd created had destroyed her marriage. The fact that Marcus reached out to me after their divorce to apologize for not seeing it sooner and to confirm that leaving her was the best decision he'd made, well, that's something Victoria doesn't know and doesn't need to. My grandmother passed away 6 months ago. She left me her engagement ring and her will, along with a letter that said, "For my granddaughter who knows that real love doesn't need to dim others to shine." She left Victoria nothing except a note that said, "You already received more than your share." My parents contested the will, of course, claiming I'd manipulated a dying woman. But Grandma had been thorough video recordings of her intentions, multiple witnesses, everything legally airtight. They lost, adding legal fees to their mounting problems. The family business my father had built with Uncle Robert has suffered. Robert bought out my father's share, unwilling to continue partnering with someone he couldn't respect. My mother's social standing in their community has plummeted as the story spread beyond family. The perfect family image they'd cultivated for so long has crumbled entirely. And me? I'm thriving. Jake and I are expecting our first child, a daughter. We've already decided that if we have more children, each will be celebrated equally, loved unconditionally. seen for who they are rather than compared to who we think they should be. My Aunt Linda asked me recently if I regret how things turned out. I thought about it for a long time before answering. I regret that my parents couldn't love me for who I was, I finally said. I regret the years I spent believing I wasn't enough, but I don't regret standing up for myself. I don't regret choosing truth over comfortable lies. And I definitely don't regret building a life surrounded by people who love me as I am, not as they wish I were. The empty chairs at my wedding will always hurt. That little girl inside me who just wanted her parents' love will always carry that wound. But she's healing, slowly, surrounded by the family I chose and who chose me in return. And sometimes, that's the best revenge of all, not destroying those who hurt you, but building something beautiful despite them. My parents wanted a perfect family with a perfect daughter. They got Victoria. But in trying to erase me to maintain their perfect image, they lost everything real and genuine they could have had. They missed my wedding to protect Victoria's future spotlight. And in doing so, they missed the chance to be part of a future filled with real love, honest relationships, and grandchildren who would have adored them. Their loss, my freedom.